Bill, let's talk about motivation with our tough kid population and academic motivation and how that gets in the way of student success.
Sure, yeah. Um, well, I think we have a funny view of motivation in our society. We view it as something that's internal to a kid or something that's like a value, or they're lazy, or a personality characteristic. We'll say, oh, look at that graduate student, she's not motivated to finish her degree or whatever. And that's not the case. I like to say to people, how many non-motivated kindergarten kids do you see? And you don't see very many, non-motivated kindergarten kids. They are there to show up the first day, drink the chocolate milk, not take a nap, and rock and roll. They're happy to be there. Then I like to say, how many non-motivated high school kids do you see? They're everywhere. You trip over them. They're legion. Something happens between kindergarten and high school. And people always say, well, what could that be? Is it the parents that just doesn't value education? No, I think it's something else. And you've heard me talk about this before, but I think it's like heavy metal poisoning. I think it's just like eating too many tuna fish sandwiches. And they tell you not to do that because tuna fish sandwiches have heavy metals in it. And you eat a heavy metal, it sticks with you. You can't get it out of your system. It binds with your fats. And I think the analogy with motivation is very similar than like eating tuna fish sandwiches with mercury in it. And that is because if you have one failure academically, it's like eating one tuna fish sandwich. It doesn't matter very much. You have two failures, so what? Three, so what? But as I start to accumulate and you have more and more failures, it's like the heavy metal in a tuna fish sandwich. They stick with you. You don't get rid of them. I always like to say to people, think of your academic successes and failures. It's much easier, believe it or not. Most people can think of their academic failures when they're embarrassed than they can think of their academic successes. So I think what happens over time is that lots of kids, not just tough kids, become poisoned to academics in general. They've had so many failures that even a new and unique academic experience they don't want to try because they failed so much. And so we as educators are put in the situation, and I truly believe this, and this is what's in the Tough Kid book. We really premise this on this notion of getting poisoned to academics, is that you have to get a kid to do something they really dislike because of their history of failures for their own good in the long run. And to do that, you need motivation systems. And I really believe you need motivation systems that are external to the kid to keep them going. And that's why we develop mystery motivators and reward spinners and dots for motivation and grab bags and chart moves, just to keep the kid going, doing things they need to do for their own good that they've had a history of failure, and they don't like doing it. And what's interesting about a lot of educators is we think we do a lot of positives for kids, but we don't really. There's excellent research. This is by Alice White, published in the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, showing that the average general ed elementary age teacher, this is a review of 16 studies, gives a positive remark or comment for an appropriate behavior on average once every 100 minutes. That same teacher will give a deprecating negative comment about a misbehavior once every 3 minutes. And I like to say, if you were in a relationship with someone that punished you once every 3 minutes and was nice to you once every 100 minutes, you'd get out of it. And that's what a lot of our tough kids are doing. They're getting out of education. And they are, again, the research shows this, it's very well documented by Gerald Patterson. Tough kids are 3 times immune to punishment. They can take 3 times the punishment that a regular goody two-shoes kid can take before they'll even start to change. They have this bring it on attitude. And so what's ironic is that it's not that we want to be just super nice people to other people, but positives absolutely work best with tough kids and as motivation. And we have to have external systems to keep them going, particularly in academics. You take a tough kid and you put him in a situation where he cannot do the academic requirements that's demanded of him, he will exhibit inappropriate behaviors to escape that situation. You don't need a functional behavior assessment to tell you that. So we have to have them keep going, keep motivated.
Great, thank you. You mentioned functional behavior assessment. Let's talk a little bit about that process. It's a common process as we get these tough kids. that schools do, but what happens after the functional behavior assessment?
Oh, that's the $64 question. That's what I hear from educators everywhere in the United States. I mean, a functional behavior assessment is just a magnificent system for assessing the issues that are setting up inappropriate behaviors, that are setting the events for them, that are motivating them with consequences. But what happens when you do the functional behavior assessment? You have to have something after that. A functional behavior assessment, in my view, is not an intervention. It is an assessment and guide to select an intervention. And that's where a lot of times it breaks down when we look at positive behavior supports Tier 2 and Tier 3 kids. The antecedents can tell what comes just before the behavior. A setting event analysis can tell us what's happening outside the situation that sets up an inappropriate behavior. The consequences can tell if it's punished behavior, rewarded behavior, or an escape behavior. But the rubber hits the road when you get that information and you have to select what that intervention should be. And that's when we want an evidence-based practice intervention that has legitimate research behind it, that it's effective. And there are absolutely marvelous resources out there that I'm amazed that people miss. How often have I heard someone say, well, if he's a tough kid on Tier 3, just do a functional behavior assessment. What are you left with afterwards? And those resources are really, really good books, and I think should be in the hands of every educator. I think Randy Sprick's Interventions book is a guide to hooking up your functional behavior assessment information with interventions. I'll put a plug in also. I think the Tough Kid book and the Tough Kid Toolbox is a really good guide for selecting. That's why they're so popular and have been for years. I think Julie Bowen's book, the book I used for my graduate students in interventions, it's the Behavioral Interventions book, is another guide. So it's doing the functional behavior assessment, but having that. We just came back from a major convention, my graduate students and I'll put another plug in here because they did a marvelous job. But we have been very interested in bullying behavior and doing a functional behavior assessment system for bullying. It is very interesting to know that of all the bullying programs out there, there's only one that has a functional behavior assessment in it. All the rest do not, which really interests me. So what we've done is we've jazzed up a functional behavior assessment of bullying program, and I even brought it down here. I was going to show you. This is our assessment book, and it has the interviews that you do with the teacher. It has an ABC tracking sheet that's an Excel sheet that shows you trends. It has an observation system where we've used Scott Ross and Rob Horner's definition for bullying, so you can actually go out on a playground, observe the target child who is exhibiting the bully behaviors, but also all the peers and compare them. But again, when you're done with that book, you're left with the antecedents, setting events, and consequences. So what we've also developed, and my graduate students have put a lot of time in on this one, is you get that information. This is the 100 top interventions for bullying from the research literature. And we haven't published this yet. It's brand new. We just presented it. But I have this graduate student team of ninjas. They are really good. And they just presented it to a packed house in Philadelphia. But it's important to do the functional behavior assessment. But without that, I think you're left with nothing. You have to splice it up with an evidence-based practice intervention that's going to help that kid. And you have to realize every intervention is not going to work with every kid. Even if you've got a great FUBA, you're going to have to sometimes change that intervention or tinker with it as time goes on.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.